Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. It is game week, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming at you on Wednesday, August 28th, just 3 days away from kickoff here in Knoxville for the 2024 season as Tennessee football opens against Chattanooga at 12:45 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, the 31st. Today, we're going to talk about that Chattanooga game. We're going to recap Tennessee's depth chart release and react to that as well, as it was a busy one with the amount of oars on it, as Tennessee has come to be regularity of the depth chart release, especially in the preseason. But we're going to get to that here today and a lot of week one storylines. But first, I got Ryan Shepard and Rick Butler with me as always. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing well, battling the allergies, a sneezing fit, which I think has died down here right before we start recording, but doing well and glad it's game week. Excited to be very, very close to having some real ball to talk about.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Less allergies for me, fortunately, but I think those will strike at some point this fall. But yeah, it's just great to be here, kind of at the end of the month, getting ready for football season. It's right on the horizon. NFL preseason's out of the way, so even that is coming up close here in less than 2 weeks or so. So a lot of fun things to look forward to. 12:45 p.m. start time is a strange one for sure, but it is nice that we won't have like a midnight, a 1 a.m. workday here on game one against Chattanooga. So I'm excited to kind of get in to see what Tennessee can do. I think it'll be a great time for them to come in and just kind of figure out a couple last things before this key NC State game coming up afterwards. But yeah, until then, it's been a good month and got a couple things to talk about here before this game.
Yeah, probably we'll get to watch the Texas A&M game after work is done. 7:30 kick for that one, so you'll at least get to probably catch one big game on Saturday slate. Love this week one slate. We got 5 big games this weekend. It's a great way to, not kick off college football season because it kind of happened last week, but actually, for all intents and purposes, kick off the season. So it's going to be a fun Saturday.
That was a good opener last week, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you get a good awesome top 10 upset. You're international, and then just Florida State. Social media loves to fire their shots at Florida State. Florida State tried to kind of fire a shot at Tennessee with the "he swung" sign at College Game Day. So an eventful week 0, which you don't normally always get that.
It was a 10 out of 10 day on the internet, no doubt about it. Because I mean, if you're a Florida State fan, you just got to log off for the season because of the amount of complaining, and rightfully so, for not getting the playoff last year, and then obviously getting pummeled by Georgia in the bowl game, all the opt-outs, okay, and then it's revenge tour. It's we're coming for you season because we got screwed, and then you get beat by unranked Georgia Tech. It's a very, very tough look and did not look inspiring at all in doing it because Georgia Tech didn't play that well. But yeah, it was a fun week 0 game. But we're going to talk about Tennessee today. Ryan, one of your favorite parts of the year is the depth chart release. I have that on good authority that it is one of your favorite things Tennessee football does. And I believe 36 oars on the depth chart for Tennessee. Yep. Only 3 starters by themselves, I think. And Nico, Cooper Mays, and Javonte Spraggins, correct?
No. Yes, in the starting 22. Some of the specialists.
Yes. Right.
Starters, but in the starting 22, yep, those are the only 3.
No defensive position without an oar. It turns out there's a Leo battle. James Pierce not safe as the starting Leo. Who'd have thought? Maybe we should have been talking about that more. But no, Ryan, there's still some things to take away from this depth chart. Specifically, the safety spot is what I want to get to. But just what was your first reaction to this depth chart release?
To laugh at it, I guess. I mean, it's the line from The Office where Ryan helps Creed set up a blog, but it's really just a Word doc on his desktop, and Ryan drops the line that even for the internet, it's pretty shocking. Even for Tennessee, and I know some people have been like, they always do this, and this is how it always is. Kind of. I mean, last year was 20, and this is 36, and that's a big difference given how it's not like they're going 4 deep. I mean, in some spots they only go 2 deep, so. It's not like they go 5 deep at every spot. So, it is a lot for that. And in the midst, and what I find so funny about it, and this is our job, especially from the standpoint of how little we get to watch in the preseason. Every little thing you get, you really have to jump on it. And you wonder if you're interpreting it too much. But in the midst of the nothingness, I wondered if I found something, or wondered if we found something. And that, look, there's a billion oars on here. But you go through the spots where there's oars, and the first player listed at about 95% of them is the player I would guess would start. Dylan
Yeah.
Sampson,
Okay.
I think he's going to start. Lance Hurd, I think he's going to start. Brew McCoy, Squirrel White, James Pierce, I feel pretty confident is going to start. All these spots, Keenan Peely, Arian Carter, they're the first one. And then right over there at one of the receiver spots, you got Brew McCoy as the first guy listed at one spot. I think he'll start with Caleb Webb as his backup, the or. You got Squirrel White, which has Nimrod. I think both will play, but Squirrel White will start. And then at the other receiver spot, you have Dante Thornton or Chris Brazzell. And that's the one where I would have said my guess would have been that Chris Brazzell would have started, with Dante Thornton being the first guy off the bench. So in the midst of them telling us nothing, I don't know if they maybe threw us a bone through the puzzle and maybe gave us something. Or maybe it'll be Chris Brazzell and he'll be the first guy out there. And maybe on top of his depth chart, it'll be riddled with the second guy listed or the third guy listed actually being the first person on the field. But that was something that I found interesting looking at the depth chart.
Yeah, Ryan's spot on here. I was actually talking to a friend had texted me after the depth chart came out. I guess that was on Monday. Today's Wednesday, so 2 days ago. And, he had a couple of questions. He was, maybe he had not been following fall camp too much. So he was really saying like, hey, has Dylan Sampson done something to open up the competition at wide or at running back? Or, is James Pierce being limited because of this or something like that? And, it's an easy answer. And exactly what Ryan was saying of, hey, no. There are battles that, we can look at this depth chart and we know that it's indicating in a specific direction, right? We know that Dylan Sampson has been limited a bit at maybe at times during fall camp, but that he's going to be Tennessee's main back and that they're going to kind of have that rotation in after them. We know that Arian Carter and Keenan Peely are likely going to be Tennessee's two starting linebackers, and then they're going to have that guys rotate under them. And then like we've been saying, the biggest one is none other than James Pierce Jr. It's like, of course, right? He's going to be a locked-in factor this whole time. So while it's easy to, if you maybe haven't been too locked in, it's maybe easy to kind of wonder about what's going on. But like Ryan said, and it kind of alluded to, it, you can make your justifications, you can make your analysis, kind of your picks about what Tennessee's starting 22 is going to look like come Saturday afternoon when they take on Chattanooga, kind of based on how they're listed on this depth chart. But again, we also know that Tennessee is a team that will do things kind of by matchup or specifically for a different scheme. So the table's open, but I think Ryan's right in the fact that we can get a pretty good idea on what they're going to do. And there's also places that we understand that's saying, hey, we can kind of read between the lines and we know what's going on there.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel like the first one listed, obviously, definitely offensively. I mean, Dante would be a slight surprise, but it does feel like the first one. John Campbell, right tackle. Like these guys are the ones we've been projecting to start. Mari Thomas, defensive tackle. Bryson Eason as well. Dominique Bailey, going on the defensive side too. So that is a storyline to watch with Thornton in the receiver spot. Another position battle that's been going on throughout camp with Jordan Thomas's injury that people have been keeping a keen eye on is the star spot. And on the first depth chart release, star spot is listed as Christian Harrison first or Boo Carter. We knew Boo Carter was in this discussion. We've thrown around other names such as Jalen McMurray or Christian Charles, who is listed elsewhere on the other safety spot opposite Andre Turrentine as the second, or if you will, behind Will Brooks. But the star spot being Christian Harrison or Boo Carter, I think kind of narrows down this discussion a little bit. And maybe we see Christian Harris start week 1 at the star spot for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what's going to happen. Even before seeing the depth chart, that would have been my guess that he would at least be the first starter out there. It'll be interesting to see what just the rotation looks like as a whole, but especially between those two guys, because it doesn't feel like as we've gotten further away from the Jordan Thomas injury, it feels like it really has whittled down to those two guys, and it doesn't feel like we've heard a bunch about other guys getting work at that spot. So what does the rotation look like between those two guys? Is it pretty even? Do they go to Boo Carter quick, early in the game? Are those guys rotating in the first half every other series or some version of that? And then to a lesser extent, I think it'll be interesting just to see if anyone other than like a real back of the depth chart guy. If one of those Jalen Murray or Christian Charles or Jordan Matthews at some point in the game does get some reps there, it would be interesting to see, just to see who do they truly feel like maybe is the third option, or another guy they could go to if another injury happens.
Yeah, and the other safety spot, Rick, as well. Just looking down, I mentioned it's Will Brooks or Christian Charles, whereas Jacoby Thomas, who maybe we thought was going to be the other starting safety opposite Turrentine, is listed as an or with Turrentine. So in this safety spot, it's Will Brooks or Christian Charles. You know, would you expect to see Will Brooks starting for Tennessee come Saturday, Rick?
I do. I do expect to see Will Brooks start for Tennessee at that safety position. And it goes back to a lot of the praise that we've heard about Will Brooks coming out. It's been from Willie Martinez. It's been from Tim Banks. It's been from Josh Heupel. It's even been from a guy like Jermon McCoy, who is a very talented defensive back with this Tennessee roster. He transferred in from Oregon State this year. But even he told us during his lone press conference availability that, man, Will Brooks is the guy, almost an encyclopedia of knowledge that he goes to when he's got a question about what the scheme looks like or what he's supposed to do, even though those two guys are at different positions. So I don't know what the production is going to be like. We're obviously going to have to wait and see. It's a guy who has found reps in the last couple of years and has been here long enough to, again, truly earn the trust of the coaching staff. So because of that and because of what we've heard, I do think that Will Brooks is going to be starting there. But we've also heard a couple of good things about Christian Charles as well. I believe that sometimes the Christians I get mixed up on. Ryan, maybe you can help me out with this, but I think Christian Charles was referred to as an X factor by one of the coaches earlier in fall camp.
Thanks.
So yeah, so Tim Banks. So that still stuck with me as well. So for me, at least, I do maybe predict kind of that Will Brooks will have that starting spot again, just because of what we've heard. But I've also heard some good things about Christian Charles that maybe makes you think that, they're going to find some time here early on to work him in. But that's definitely, again, you talk about the star a second ago, you talk about these safety positions. I'm interested to see how that, what that is just going to look like over the course of these next 4 quarters. But then as we've been talking about this whole fall so far, Tennessee's got a really important game coming up the next week as well that you want some of these things solidified with. So that's definitely one of the things that I'm looking for. But I see Will Brooks. Ryan, are you in agreement there?
Yeah, I am. To the point, I'd be surprised if the first 2 safeties aren't Will Brooks and Andre Turrentine out there for Tennessee. I thought Charles, I guess in the listing of so many co-starters, maybe it wasn't as big a surprise, but him being up there I thought was interesting. And it's feels like there's so little we truly learn about the team during fall camp. And most of the things that, there's a few things I do feel like I've learned or I have a different outlook on. Most of them are on the positive side, and you kind of have to temper yourself on that stuff because, again, it's just a lot of positivity. Everybody's has a good fall camp. Everybody's has the best shape of their life, all that good stuff, all those cliches. The one that I would say, the thing I would be the negative that I feel like I've learned, or just I feel like the stock down, is Jacoby Thomas. I feel like my outlook for him has completely plummeted over fall camp. It's just the fact that he's listed, Turrentine's the one guy that feels like is fully locked in, and he's going to be a Jalen McCullough, Trey Flowers of he's going to play just about every snap.
Yeah.
And I know that they cross-train. It's not like those 2 safety spots are wide different. But the fact that Thomas was even listed with him, with the guy that you feel pretty confident is going to play about every snap, doesn't seem to make it feel like he's any sort of serious contender to start. And I'm sure he will play. But from a guy going into camp, it felt very likely that he was going to be a starter at safety. And if you would have told me that Jordan Thomas was injured and it wasn't like they moved Jordan Thomas from star to safety because Boo Carter just had such a good camp, it'd have been like, yeah, it'd be really surprising for him not to be a starter. And it almost feels like he's running as a distant third or maybe even a fourth entering the season.
So what led to that for you? Is it lack of buzz from the coaches because they're just talking about everybody else? Is it something you've seen on the practice field? What led to his stock plummeting for you?
Yeah, no, I think it's mostly buzz, not a ton of what we've seen on the practice field. And I was lower on Jacoby Thomas than most, I think, to begin with, of not really seeing it just from what he did at MTSU. Not that he couldn't help Tennessee, but just being like, this is the plan at safety.
Not like this guy's some stud transfer. Yes.
Yeah, he wasn't like an all-conference USA guy or anything like that. And I think even if he was an all-conference USA guy, you'd have some questions about, all right, the level of play and the speed of the game is going to be radically different in the SEC. He was like a above average safety at MTSU. So it never made a ton of sense to me that it was like, all right, this is just a plan. They're not bringing in any other safeties. It's his job to lose, and I'm sure it wasn't quite his job to lose. But the fact that there hasn't been a ton of buzz, the fact that it feels like for 2 weeks now that it's been, if not set in stone, pretty firm that Will Brooks is going to be the starter. And again, I'm just showing too much disrespect to Will Brooks. I know he knows the defense really well. I think he's going to be solid and not bust a ton, but it's not like he's a player that I'm like thinking is going to have a lot of buzz and is going to have a real breakout season or anything like that either.
He's not a difference maker. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. To Ryan's point a second ago too, it's I think if you're listening to this podcast right now, if you're watching this podcast, you might be one of the ones who likes to watch the highlight videos from fall camp, and you can pretty much see what we see, and it's a lot of kind of walkthrough drills. You're not getting a great understanding about just sort of the production of these guys in the field. Yes, we get to see some one-on-ones when we're lucky. I believe that was the final activity that we got to saw from fall camp overall, but ultimately you're kind of just making these judgments based on buzz and what you're hearing and what the coaching staff is saying, what the players are saying. And I think you can make good opinions based on that. You can find takeaways from it, but you also understand that there is a lot of positivity being shown before the season. So a lot of it does come down to buzz, and that's ultimately why this first game is going to be so important and a great opportunity for us to truly get a good look about what these players can do on the field. Because again, we've seen them, drop back and do a drop step and see what that looks like or find their spacing on the field, but it hasn't really been in a sort of, game-like atmosphere, at least, again, that we've seen. Obviously, they've done a lot of it, but this week is going to be a really important time to see what those guys look like, to see if there's any kind of rotation, to maybe see if Christian Harrison or Boo Carter looks like they can be a player who steps up and takes that role for themselves. Because especially at that star position, I think that's what you're looking for. I think, Tennessee can only benefit by having a guy come up and say, hey, I'm so good at this position that you can't afford not to play me here. I think that's obviously what they're looking for. So this first game, I think, is going to give us a good amount of answers. Not all the answers by any stretch of the imagination. I think if all things go right, this is a blowout for Tennessee. But I think we get a good indication of what some of these players are like on the field to kind of go in addition to the buzz that we've been hearing for the last month or so.
And all this talk is important, of course, too. But Ryan, it is important to note that there's just going to be a lot of rotation probably in the secondary as well, especially week one. Like multiple guys are going to see the field. There's going to be a lot of rotation against Chat just to probably get a feel for these guys in a game like atmosphere, especially the more inexperienced guys, which is quite a bit in the secondary.
Yeah, and it's funny to say this because I've joked about the silliness of how they handled the depth chart. But in its own way, a depth chart is kind of a silly way to look at it. At least defensively.
Yes.
Because offensively, yes, it does make sense. But defensively, it's like they're going to play a ton of guys, and they're going to rotate. Yeah. And all those guys on the defensive line that were listed as co-starters, they're all going to play, especially in the interior.
Yeah,
they're going to play a relatively similar amount of snaps. So it's it's not something you should have read too much into if they had listed the starter and the backup in the third string. So you're right. They're going to play a ton of guys, I think, on defense just general this season, but especially this week. And I think it'll be curious, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, talking about the star battle. How much do we see different guys play in the first half as opposed? Because we know we're going to see a bunch of guys play over the course of the game because Tennessee should be up by a bunch at halftime. But how consistent is that rotation? And how deep do we see them go at spots other than the defensive line, at linebacker, at safety, at star, even at corner to a degree. And then it'll obviously be even more interesting at North Carolina State when rubber kind of hits the road on these decisions and you're going to ride with your guys, how much they rotate then.
Yeah, it's a good point. And you talk about the defensive line, of course, a ton of rotation. Rick, do you think it's a positive sign for, like I said, I know that there's a reason for the litany of oars along the defensive line because of the rotation, but do you think it is a positive sign for guys like Jordan Ross, David Hobbs, even someone like a Tyree Weathersby to be included in this discussion as being listed as an or one? I mean, I know these guys aren't going to see the field as much as the others, certainly the starters, but to even be listed as an or one, I think is probably a positive sign for these guys who had some good fall camps.
Yeah, sure. You got it, Rick.
I do as well. I think that it's a positive sign for them that they're being listed on this depth chart, but I also think that, think maybe what's probably been more positive for them throughout the fall is just what they're being told inside of this defensive line room by Rodney Garner, the coaching that they're getting, the guys who are working on the field and saying, all right, if here's the first platoon we run out, maybe here's going to be the second unit, here's going to be the third unit. Here's kind of why we don't see a lot of drop off between these three units. Obviously, there is going to be some. That's why you're in that order. But I think they feel really good about the depth. So I would say that if you're one of these guys who might be like a David Hobbs or a Tyree Weathersby, especially Weathersby, who's maybe coming off of an injury, I think it maybe excites you to see this depth chart if they've seen it at all. But I would imagine that there's been some excitement building a little bit before this as these guys really get to work together on this field. A lot of the defensive linemen have talked about so far during camp just sitting in that film room and looking around, looking to their left and looking to their right and just seeing so many capable players who are in that room together. So I definitely think that there's been a lot of confidence building throughout the fall for that room. I think there's a lot of guys who are excited and who have belief in themselves that they might be able to make an impact on this team. But certainly I think the depth chart plays into that as well. But I think especially Rodney Garner's getting these guys tuned up during fall camp to the idea where they're saying, hey, you know what? If I can make an impact, then I think I'm going to get on the field. And I think that's what's most important for these guys.
Last position group I want to talk about before we kind of dive in a little bit to chat and a game preview is the running back spot. Dylan Sampson, they're all oars, by the way, 5 deep, all oars. Yep. Dylan Sampson atop.
They'd be a good rowing team. They each got their oar. That's a strong team right there. You put Khalifa Keith in the back. It's not bad.
But Cam Seldon being second, I think makes sense. He's working his way back from injury, going to play Saturday. I believe the phrase was cut him loose on Saturday against Chat. Deshaun Bishop third, no surprise there. But then Khalifa Keith and then Peyton Lewis listed fifth on this depth chart. How much are we going to see these guys play, specifically Bishop, Keith, Lewis, Ryan? In the opener, probably more than normal, but just, in the first half of the season, if you will, barring injury, how much impact do you think these guys deeper on the running back depth chart can make on Tennessee's offense?
I think Deshaun Bishop's going to have a role. I really do. I would flirt with it, even saying I think he might be Tennessee's second running back this year ahead of Cam Seldon. More skeptical for Lewis and Keith just from I don't see Tennessee playing more than 3 running backs at any point, maybe if an injury happens. But even then, I think they could probably lean more on 2 guys and it'd be a much smaller role. So, I would almost put, Dylan Sampson is the number 1 guy. I would almost put Deshaun Bishop and Cam Seldon more in the same group of they're probably 2 and 3, but who's 2 and who's 3? And then Dylan Sampson and Keith at 4 and 5.
Yeah, and then just one quick thing to follow up on that. I think it's important for for obviously Tennessee to have a little bit of versatility, with these running backs as well. Peyton Lewis, I think a lot of people are high on, but if they've already got a lot of high-end speed from Dylan Sampson and Deshaun Bishop, then, maybe that doesn't kind of work its way into the rotation as well. So I think Ryan makes a great point there. There's been so much talk about Deshaun Bishop. It is impossible not to kind of forecast something for him coming up before we see what they actually do. So I think Ryan's right. I think those are your main 3 guys. And Tennessee continues the 3-man rotation that they've loved to use in the past.
Cam Seldon also listed atop the kick returner and punt returner on the depth chart. Granted, there's oars there with kick returner being Seldon or Bishop, punt Seldon or McCoy or Boo, but Seldon atop both. It really feels like, Rick, that Cam Seldon is just going to be the Swiss Army knife for Tennessee in multiple facets of the game, whether it's, obviously using him as a weapon in the receiving game offensively. Sure, he can run the ball as well, good around the goal line potentially. And then on special teams, it just feels like Cam Seldon, maybe he's not the second running back. Maybe that's Deshaun Bishop, but Cam Seldon is going to have an impact probably in every game in some sort of fashion for Tennessee this season.
Yeah, Tennessee specialists are fascinating. I wrote about it, so I don't have the exact article with me, but it's something like 90+% of Tennessee's kick and punt returns are now out the door this season with D. Williams in the NFL, who I also believe, by the way, just made the Seahawks
he made the
53-man roster. Mike Eckler tweeting about the fart in a skillet that is D. Williams. So Tennessee's got a lot of production to replace back there, but the guy who was next to D. Williams on the kick returns was Cam Seldon. And you just think about that background that he brings to the table, being a wide receiver and a running back during high school. You know that this guy is an offensive like you had alluded to a second ago, a Swiss Army knife. And he's actually proven that on the field. Again, it was at the high school ranks. Tennessee moved him to the running back to start things off last year. But I think he's a guy that we definitely see in a breakout position. I think he gets some more touches. But, I don't know what they're going to do. If Squirrel White's going to be back there at punt return, I got to imagine so. Maybe Boo Carter gets a couple runs. But one notable thing is that Mike Eckler, who is never short of words and never short of passion when he delivers those words, is he said a couple different times when he talked to the media just about a week or so ago that he believes that this is going to be Tennessee's best return unit that they've had so far in the Josh Heupel era, obviously under Mike Eckler so far at Tennessee. Wow. So I do think that is high praise. I think that he is a high energy guy that wants, his room to believe that, whether it's going to be true or not. I think he's the kind of guy that, is going to, again, force that belief into his room. He continues to say it with the media as well, but you look at the lineup though, and they do have some really good returners, and Tennessee has had good returning schemes in the past. Again, Mike Eckler dropped kind of those statistics of yards gained versus yards allowed, especially in the punt game. We have those written in that article as well. But Tennessee's got some great athletes back there to return those. So I don't exactly know what it's going to look like. I would imagine we can kind of expect, plenty of Cam Selden, Deshaun Bishop, Squirrel White, things of that nature. But Mike Eckler is very high in this group going in. Now, again, maybe that's a little bit of just preseason talk, but I think they got enough guys. Now, D. Williams was special last year, right? So it's hard for me to believe that, somebody's going to be as good as him. He's obviously making, again, an impact with the NFL, but they've got some deep guys. So I'm excited to see what the return game can turn into, just because, again, we know that Mike Eckler and this staff puts a lot of work into it. They want to really get an advantage in that place.
Give me Boo Carter or give me Def at punt returner.
Yeah, you think so?
I mean, I don't know if it will be him because, it'd be the riskier thing. But that's what I want to see. His highlight tape, and obviously I think Michigan recruited him to play offense. He could have easily played slot receiver at Tennessee. Let me see him with the ball in his hands. And that's the spot I think that makes the most sense. I think he could really be an elite punt returner.
Do you have any nerves or hesitation about Squirrel White being there? And maybe if you do have Boo Carter, that just gives you something else? Or are you just saying, hey,
no.
I think Boo Carter's just dynamic player. Just would like to see him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Tennessee has enough depth that I'm not a receiver that I'm not super worried about, Squirrel White injured. I would say you trust Squirrel White more just because you feel like he's not going to make mistakes back there. And obviously D. Williams being a freshman, maybe more prone to it. So that would be the one argument that I would say, maybe you don't put it back there, but that's who I want to see.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Ryan, you got to talk to Chattanooga Times Free Press's Gene Henley to preview Chattanooga's obviously trip to Tennessee and this game upcoming. And that article is on RocketTopInsider.com as of this morning on Wednesday. So go check that out if you haven't yet. It's a lot of good information on the mocks, but just what'd you kind of learn from that discussion? Of course, Chattanooga, top 10 FCS team. This is not a bad FCS team, of course. They're going to compete atop their conference. So what'd you kind of learn about Chattanooga from this discussion with Gene?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was actually talking to Grant Ramey about this before one of the practices or one of the media availabilities this week of we're so glad it's back, but you kind of wish that it was like an FBS team, and even a small one at Kent State or UTEP. And, I said, if Kent State's like they were last year, I think UTC might be a better team. I mean, Kent State went 1-11 last year with its one win coming over Central Connecticut, and UTC is a good FCS team. So, talking to Gene, I mean, I thought that, veteran quarterback back, the receivers back, they kind of have the mainstays of their passing attack are the same, breaking in new running backs. They lose their top two rushers from a season ago. And then a defense that is good on the defensive line, good at linebacker, good on the front seven, but really shaky in the defensive backfield. You don't really know what it's going to look like at corner. And I think that's kind of a bad formula for this game, because as good as your FCS defensive line is, the size advantage Tennessee's going to have on the offensive line, you still completely expect them to control the line of scrimmage. And then obviously we know the way Tennessee likes to throw the ball down the field in this offense. And I think you'd rather have some good corners at the FCS level that you feel like can maybe hang with Tennessee's receivers as opposed to just the size disadvantage that you're going to have on the line of scrimmage. So that was the thing that stood out. He also had a great line, and we do this piece every week, and if it's an SEC game or a game that's pretty even, like next week for North Carolina State, the question will be, what's the key for North Carolina? What does North Carolina State need to do to win this game? For a game like this, I asked, what is UTC? What would have to happen for this game to be close in the second half. And Gene, who did used to cover Tennessee for Chattanooga Times Free Press, had a good line. I think he covered that 2019 Tennessee team. He said Jeremy Pruitt would have to come back and coach for the Vols in this one. So as good as UTC is at an FCS level, them and Furman will be atop SoCon most likely. No expectation that this is going to be they're going to be able to give Tennessee a competitive game.
I'm actually glad you brought that up real quick, just because I'm looking through Tennessee's game notes here, and that 2019 game was the last time that Tennessee had faced Chattanooga. Tennessee won 45-0. However, I believe that was one of the wins that got vacated. No longer on the record. Scrubbed from the record. I believe it was one of the vacated. So Tennessee no longer has that critical 45-0 win in 2019. You just got to go back to 2014 for a 45-10 win. But Tennessee 39-2 against Chattanooga.
That 2019 game was the first Tennessee football game I ever covered. Fun fact.
No way. The chat one?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
The NCAA, well, it didn't happen, so I don't actually think you did. The NCAA said, we don't care. We don't care about your debut appearance. We don't care.
Yeah, you need a new first game, Ryan.
Game.
What would it be? What would be the next one? You remember?
Well, I guess it's just the wins that got vacated from that year. So the first loss I covered that year for Tennessee, I think would have been Georgia when Brian Maurer started that game. So I guess it would be the Georgia game that year. When
was that the Scorpion? Was it the Scorpion game where he face planted into the dirt and his legs kind of came up from behind?
State. That was Mississippi State the next week. That game was, I can't remember who the Georgia player, maybe Lewis Seen. I feel like he probably wouldn't have been playing at that point. But in the fourth quarter, just a complete like nickel or safety blitz, and came right at Brian Maurer from not the blind side, and he just didn't see him, and he got absolutely destroyed. And a Georgia guy picked it up and ran it in 70 yards for a touchdown. And I remember Brian Maurer also retired this week.
Congrats. Yeah, I was just going to say, we actually have news about Brian Maurer.
And I probably shouldn't laugh about this, but the image I'll have, I mean, he got destroyed on that play. And he like walked back to the sideline, and right when he got to the sideline, he just like collapsed onto the ground. I shouldn't laugh about it.
Oh no.
That's my number one image from that game, is that play and him just collapsing onto the ground in the sideline in pain after taking an unbelievable hit from some sort of Georgia safety.
I want the record to state that me chuckling during this is laughing at Ryan telling the story, and just that alone. So that's I thought it was
Ryan's the real bad guy
told story. Yeah, absolutely.
Rick, I know we talked a lot about the rotations and all these battles and the depth chart, so that kind of answers this question a little bit too. But what is something you're looking for from Tennessee in this game? Should be a blowout, should jump on them early, probably a lot of big plays offensively. But what is potentially the number one thing you're looking for out of Tennessee in this week 1 game?
Ooh, number one thing I'm looking for. Are we moving just kind of the rotations to the side? Is that part of it? Because I think there's a couple of different ways you can kind of approach this. And there is certainly position battles that I want to see, right? I want to see what that star is going to look like, kind of who's going to earn that spot. Going to want to see, just kind of what Tennessee does with the receivers and the running backs and some of the positions that we've talked about, certainly. But if you put all those things to the side, I like to see what Nico Iamaleava does just from a managing the game perspective, getting the offense down the field, how quickly he can sort of run this tempo, especially when you have the starters in the game. I'm looking for Tennessee to play a penalty-free game, or at least be able to cut back on those significantly. That was an area where Tennessee kind of got caught up in at times last year. I know it's not going to exactly be the same sort of challenging competition that you might find later in the year, but how is Tennessee going to approach the red zone on both offense and defense? That's something that's actually had a couple of big talking points, a couple more than I thought there was going to be this fall, but some big talking points around just sort of Tennessee's execution, both offensively and defensively in the red zone. So how well can they sort of get in their spots and get where they need to be and execute in those places? So I think there's nothing, kind of surprising that I'm looking for. It's a lot of the basic things that you would want to see in a season opener. And mainly, more importantly, I want to see if Tennessee can just kind of run up the score, if they can assert their dominance and start the season off with a bang and say, you know what, we're Tennessee. We believe that we have a shot at the college football playoffs this year. We believe that we have one of the best 12 to 10 teams in the country, and we want to be able to prove that. So again, nothing. I'm not breaking too much stuff. I don't think I'm bringing anything that no one's already thinking about already. But when you put away the rotations, you sort of what the players are going to look like. Again, just kind of a clean game. Want to see how the execution goes. A new quarterback with a center who's been there for a while. So just how do all those things go operationally? And then one of the most important things I'm curious of, and we won't necessarily figure this out until after the game, but how well did this in-helmet communication work? Where there are opportunities where Tennessee felt like they found advantages throughout the game by being able to put something in Nico's ear or put something in Keenan Peely's ear on the defensive side of the ball. So that's not something that I'm going to, I think, notice during the game all the way up from the press box, but going to be one of my takeaways from week one is just sort of how effective was it? How much did Tennessee use it? We'll figure that all out in the post-game press conference. So those are really some of the things I'm looking for. Nothing too stand out.
Yeah, Ryan, individually, I mean, you want to see Nico be fluid, of course. Any, wrinkles in his game, any ebbs, I think would not be good, obviously, with facing Chat. So you want to see Nico be fluid. You want to see him play maybe a little bit over a half, 3/4, and look good doing it. I think defensively, you want to see, the secondary look good. That's probably the position group you're looking to the most. But maybe individually for you, Ryan, who are you looking to see? Who are you watching closely in this Chat game?
Well, I think one thing, and this is multiple guys, but obviously kind of Nico, I want to see Tennessee hit chunk plays in the pass game down the field. I mean, that's obviously such a big aspect of Tennessee's offense, and against nobody did they hit them last year. I mean, they had to go to the run the ball every play game plan against Austin Peay last year that the passing game was so bad. I think that's one big thing. Aaron Carter will be a guy I'm watching. Just kind of a lot of those guys I talked about last week as sophomores that I'm high on Tennessee's defense. I'll be watching him. I'll be watching both, interested to see what does Tennessee's third down pass rush package look like, who are the four guys there, and I'll probably be watching the edge rusher opposite of James Pierce a lot, whether that is Josh Josephs or maybe it's Caleb Herring, whoever that is, because I think, as we talked about, that's going to be a big part of Tennessee's defense, at least their pass rush taking another step, is having another guy that defenses really fear besides James Pierce. So those are the things that I'll be looking for. Maybe Ethan Davis too. Not that I'll be sitting there staring, watching him on specific plays, but just how much do they throw the ball to him, especially as we've talked about between the 20s. So those are kind of the main things that I'll be looking for. Maybe players I'll have my eye on.
38.5 point spread according to DraftKings. Maybe a little lower than I would have thought. Rick, do you have an early lean for a score prediction? You don't have to share the specific one, but what are you kind of looking at here for Saturday?
I think it's going to be a blowout. What did you just say the spread was?
On DraftKings, I had 38.5.
Ooh.
I know.
I think you're in the 40. I think you're in the 45-7 territory. I think Tennessee can push up to the 50 if they really want to. But yeah, I think you're looking at 45-7, somewhere around then. So 38 is an unfortunate answer for that. I did want to follow up on something that Ryan said a second ago. Whoa. I'm not making a prediction right now. I'm just speaking. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. One thing that Ryan talked about a second ago that I just want to dial back to real quick. I was looking up the stats for it, but Ryan talked about some of the chunk plays. You go back to the orange and white game, and I did feel like there were a lot of moments where Tennessee was trying to get those chunk plays, and they got them at times. Tennessee scored with a 13-yard touchdown pass. Not that that's really a chunk play, but it was execution in the red zone. Jake Merklinger had a 26-yard touchdown run. That's not really a pass. Nico had a 27-yard touchdown connection to Chaz Nimrod that was actually right in front of my feet. So I got to see that one personally. Gaston Moore had a 63-yard touchdown pass to Mike Matthews. And, of course, we know that Chris Brazzell had the 71-yard touchdown pass. So they showed that they've got some guys in the spring game who could attack down the field. And again, I know they were probably running through a lot of things, but they did, to me, show an emphasis to let's get the ball moving back down the field. Let's really get it out of Nico's hands. Let's get it to these wide receivers. We believe that they're talented enough to make the plays in space. So chunk plays. I wish I'd thought of that one myself. That was a good one. I think you can look back to the spring game to see that that's an area that Tennessee wants to be more effective at as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I just want to say about the receiver, going back to the question I asked you guys, what are you looking for? I'm looking for those third quarter, fourth quarter plays from receivers and just what that rotation is. And as the game progresses, the backups get in. Is it Mike Matthews making a big play? Is Braylon Staley making a play? Are they even getting on the field with ample time enough to make a play? what does that look like later in the game? Potentially with a backup quarterback, of course, but just that receiver rotation and how heavy they rotate and how soon they rotate, I guess would be what I'm looking for.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And this, one singular guy have a really big game. I kind of doubted in this one. I bet they spread the ball around, but that definitely will be something worth looking at. Two other things I will at this point. I like Tennessee to cover. And then going back to our first game thing, I just completely missed on the fact I covered the Florida game next week, and they lost like 31-3 in
Oh,
Gainesville.
nice.
All time depressing game.
I remember that one. Wow.
So you think Tennessee covers? Do they hit 50?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I was thinking like 59, 10-ish, that kind of range. Borderline
Yeah.
60. I think the
Yeah,
offense
you
has a
think-
big day. Big
I
plays
do
all
too.
around. I
For the
blitz.
record,
Nico
I
plays a
do
lot.
think they're going to cover as well.
What do you say?
Well,
Ryan?
the score you loosely said was exactly the line.
Well, I know.
You said what was the
think
line?
I
38?
think the
It's like
45-7
It's like he
roughly.
built his score prediction
know, 'cause
around
I
the
feel-
spread.
I'm looking at these prior matchups between Tennessee and Chattanooga, and most
is
of them are
diving
40s
deep
to
into
one
history.
score. So it is in my head a little bit. It is what I've been looking at lately. I'm like, wow, that actually does make for the exact score that they pretty much have had in the past. But no, I think they cover. I think that was the first thing I said. Not wishy-washy.
Rick's like, let me see. Back in 2004,
I won't have this name. I won't.
he's like, back in
I won't accept
2004, he's got to get the glasses on. He's like, back in 2004, let's see. Okay, Tennessee won
Got the readers.
49-10. Let's take the average of the gaps here throughout the year.
None of this was happening. My brain is just big brained enough to go ahead and make all those connections at once. Thank you. Sharp.
And
You're right, Ryan. I
conveniently
appreciate that.
pick a score prediction that is exactly the spread.
That's not my
after I
score.
told
It's
you
not
the
my
spread.
score prediction. It's not my score prediction. I'm just saying it's around this territory. We're talking a blowout game. Not my score prediction, although it might be now. It certainly might be now.
Just to
It
prove
would be a good bit. It would be a good bit now if you made that your score prediction. I'll give you
It
credit. I would
certainly
respect
might
it.
be now. Thank
Jack,
you.
what I was saying was I do think Nico plays a lot in this game, at least through the third quarter, if not into the fourth quarter. And it's a little bit of the NFL preseason debate, obviously to a larger degree, but it's like Nico's played one game, and I get that it's UTC, and I get the last thing that can happen is to get him hurt in this game. But I think any amount of reps in this game could be meaningful for him, just given the lack of football that he's played at the college level.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it always has felt like Heupel kind of does a drive extra than what we would think. And it was like, oh, Hendon's coming out here. Nope. Hendon's coming out for another drive. Even though they're up 48 on some no-name. Like it always feels like he kept the quarterback in a little longer than you would have thought. So
and I think you also just want to get those reps in, right? You want Chris Brazell to field as many catches, as he can from Nico. You want Dante Thornton to be in the same place. I think that, again, going back to Dante last year, I think that maybe some of the mental side of things maybe was a little bit overwhelming at times this year. So how can Tennessee maybe do a better job of getting some of these new receivers more comfortable in the offense early on? How are they going to get some of them comfortable early into the games? I'd like to see Tennessee maybe hit a couple screen passes, hit a couple quick passes to those guys that we're talking about, to some of those newcomers, just to get them, just to get a little juice flowing through them, right? Just to kind of say, hey, we're moving the ball. I've got a pass recorded. You don't want some of those guys waiting until a little bit later in the game to find their first pass. So I do think it'll be important for Tennessee to kind of spread the ball around early on. But I am noting who they're going to get the ball to first on that first drive, and who they're going to get involved in the offense, because I think that'll tell you about who they want comfortable for that game. Not that it's a 4-quarter contest that they're going to be anticipating, but again, just kind of seeing some seeds that are being planted for the season, if you will.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Will be an interesting game to watch. 12:45 p.m. Eastern Time, SEC Network, correct, for Saturday's game.
You are correct.
Kick off the season. Going to be a fun Week 1 slate. Any big bold predictions you guys got for the Week 1 slate? Any upsets this weekend you're looking at for the big games?
Not really. Nothing.
I figured one of y'all would think Florida beats Miami or something. That seems like a very hipster pick right now.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it happens. I think it'll be a good game, but I haven't dove. It's rough. I haven't dove deep into any of them.
I'll give you guys something. Mountaineers over the Nittany Lions in Morgantown. West Virginia beats Penn State.
That'd be very funny.
It'd
Yeah,
be
that would
awesome.
kind of be
Wow.
version of Georgia Tech, Florida State.
Yeah. West Virginia, yeah.
Where is game day going to be this week, Jack?
It's College Station for Notre Dame game. Yeah.
Okay.
USC LSU's on Sunday, right? So it's the next day. Then Florida State plays Monday. So got spaced out a couple of days. But yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of look into week 1 yet. Just trying to, stay up to date with everything Tennessee this week. And I'll do that deep dive here in a bit. But just excited for college football to be back. I mean, it is most exciting time of the year for sure.
No doubt about it. Before we hop on out of here, Rick, you are no longer undefeated, but do you want to continue doing the game? It's up to you.
Yeah, I think the third from the bottom is Seth Rollins.
Yeah, maybe we ditch this game. I don't think Rick's anymore.
I have been. I will say I've been in my head the last couple of games after that, or last couple of minutes after that loss. This game is getting tough. That's another loss. I'm going to try to move out of it with a little bit of positivity, and say that we got a lot of great stuff coming up here for the season over at Rocked Up Insider. So make sure that you are tuned into the website. We got a lot of good coverage. Yeah. It's a lot of. I'm trying to move away from this, if you can tell, to Ryan's delight.
I'm surely capable
Rick's
of
finest
doing
moment on the pod.
We've got a lot of good stuff coming up. You'll want to stay tuned. The thing that we like to do for the people is to give the people the content, to make it accessible. Everything that we do is accessible, and that's the way that it's going to stay throughout the football season. So whether it's a podcast, whether it's a post game, whether it's analysis, whether it's a post game recap, something like that, everything that we do is going to be accessible to you. So make sure you're following along with Racked Up Insider on all just platforms, so you can find those things, because I'm telling you, we got some great things in the pipeline coming up this fall, and you won't want to miss any of it. So we got a lot of good stuff coming up.
You heard the man at Rocked Up Insider on all your social platforms, rockedupinsider.com for all your Tennessee football coverage needs. You can follow him at Rick Butler on social. Ryan is at rshump00. That's SCHUMP. And follow me at Jack Foster Media. Until next time, when we're breaking down the ball that happened in Neyland Stadium, we'll see you and have fun watching Tennessee's opener.